Welcome to the west coast of Australia, 2134, a country that has been ravaged by World War III and rebuilt on corruption. The rich live big, enjoying the view from the top while the rest of us fight to scrape out a living. The only hope many of us have is to con or carve our way up the ladder. Fortune favours the bold, after all. And to add to the chaos, advanced body tech, body augmentations and cybernetics have changed society forever and led to huge rises in crime and violence. And so the hunters have been established, a halfway point between federal police and bounty hunters. The hunters work outside the law and put their lives on the line for their country, for their gods, and for money. In these cities, you do what you can to stay alive. It's all you can do. I was staring down the barrel of a 7-foot-tall orc with what looked like an anti-tank gun sticking out the end of a military-grade cybernetic arm. This was not what I had in mind when I got on the train for a nice leisurely trip home. The emergency red lighting flickered on and off, and the sense of dramatic couldn't be more heightened if I'd tried. I was pretty sure Orc Boy wasn't with the gang members. He was well too dressed for one thing. They were sporting denim vests and mohawks, some lovely prison tattoos and a range of dated military tech. Some of them having swapped out their eyes and ears for permanent optic upgrades, half their faces covered in metal. Rather grim looking, if I must say so. The orc was oddly the best dressed one here, which made him look all the more menacing with those weapons extended. Eric was shaking. I was waiting for him to piss himself or pass out. "Hands up," the gangsters at the other end yelled. "We just want the gnome. Hand him over, and you can go." I was about to reply to this surprisingly level-headed thug when the orc's other arm split in two and a 3-foot saw blade appeared. "You can have him when you pry him from my cold, dead hands." Well, that was incredibly final. Fear chimed back in all of a sudden. I've got the train back in motion. Brace yourselves." She didn't give me a chance. The train went from slow idle to a full light speed in an instant. Everyone was thrown from their feet and Eric fell against me, dropping the wand. The orc was the only one who kept his footing. He pushed off the wall behind him, capitalizing on this moment of chaos, and charged down the walkway. The gangers didn't know what hit them. From where I lay, I could hear gunfire and screams. Always a comforting combination of noises. I scooped up the wand, stashing it in my thigh holster, and lifted Eric back to his feet. He was heavier than I expected, and I quickly realized why as I put a hand on his back to hurry him back the way I'd come. "You're wearing a ballistic vest?" "Well, yeah," he exclaimed between breaths. We moved through the door into the previous carriage. "So you knew you'd be attacked then?" He shrugged. "I figured it was a good idea when I stole the wand." He trailed off and turned around. "The wand!" "I've got it," I said as I shoved him from behind. "Keep moving if you want to live. Fia, tell me something good." "Well, we're moving at 300 Ks. Anyone who isn't on the train is long gone." "Excellent. Any bad news?" She didn't respond for a moment, probably making sure she had all the bad news collected to give me all at once. "There's still quite a lot of muscle, and your new friend is nearly done socializing." "Shit." What shit?" Eric asked, not knowing the other side of the conversation. "Your life choices." "Fuck you, man." "Tell me I'm wrong, short stack." "I need to get out of here." His eyes lit from within, a dim blue light, the telltale sign that he was opening up menus and programs in his internal CPU. He clutched his head all of a sudden and cried out, falling to the floor. I dropped down beside him and grabbed him by the chin, forcing his eyes to focus on mine. I extended my senses into his mind. The hacker who had taken the train had tried to spike him. I pushed back the invasive program and tried to put him back on his feet. He panted and shook. "I thought you'd be smarter than that," I said, pulling him along behind me. I wasn't thinking," he stammered. "No shit. I suggest you put up some good firewalls and keep your head down. You're no good to me dead. Oh, thank you, he said sarcastically. Your concern for my health is overwhelming. I turned and leveled a finger at him. Be thankful. I'm probably the only person on this train who does care if you live or die. Why are you so interested in me then? Because there's a price on your head and I have bills to pay. Now shut up unless you want to take your chances with them. I pointed over my shoulder with a thumb. He went silent, either contemplating his best course of action or sulking. We had made it all the way back to my seat. The orc's pink sleeping mask lay discarded along with the scrap of paper under the table. I pulled my bag down from the overhead and ran my forefinger along its lock. It popped open, exposing a change of clothes, a cheap suit, and a lockbox beneath. Eric looked around nervously at the crowd of other passengers. I thought the anti-violence programs on these trains stopped people from being able to activate weapons and mods, he said, watching the pandemonium around him. The security guard from before nowhere to be seen. It's the first thing they deactivated when they took the train, I explained. But I'm planning on fixing that. I punched in a code on the pad of the lockbox in my hands. It opened. If it's running, most firearms and mods will freeze up. I didn't even need to tell Fia what I was thinking. She knew. On it, she confirmed. Which is why, I continued, I need to pick something up. I lifted what looked like a sword hilt from the box, one with a brass knuckle bowl and red leather grip. A yellow tassel hung from the pommel. The blade was oddly absent. A lot of good that's gonna do, Eric commented, glancing at my bag. I need a weapon too. What else you got in there? You don't get anything, I said, closing my bag back up. You've got me. Oh, great, came the sarcastic reply. Let's make a deal. You shut the hell up, and I'll continue to try and keep you alive. Do I have much of a choice? He protested. Not if you know what's good for you, Fia muttered over the comm. Not if you know what's good for you, I parroted. I hung the hilt off my belt and moved back down the line towards the carriage where I'd encountered the guy with the disco lights for legs. Eric grabbed my tattered sleeves. We're going back? I turned on him, my anger at his stupidity finally overflowing. Look around you, you fucking idiot. You put all these people in danger the moment you got on this train. We're going back that way to keep the danger as far away from them as possible. I found the security guard I'd first met and grabbed him by the collar. No one comes through this door unless it's me, do you understand? He stuttered, clearly scared. What the hell am I gonna do? I opened the door and pulled Eric through with me. Lock the door, and hope they don't have explosives. I hoped all the passengers had fled to the carriages that hadn't become war zones. This one was certainly empty now. I wasn't sure about the others further back. I was about to ask Fia to run the cameras and check when the PA service crackled to life. Good evening, everyone. It was the cool, calm voice of a psychopath pretending to be normal. You can always tell. You can call me the conductor. I have taken over the train service for this evening. I stopped in my tracks. Now listen up. I'm only here for the gnome. Not just any gnome. You could call this a professional dispute. He's been paid for a job and now he doesn't want to deliver. So I'm asking all you able-bodied people to help me return my investment. I expect him to be handed over with all his possessions. If he's alive, it's a bonus. A bonus, Eric quavered. That's encouraging. So, what am I offering in return? Continued the conductor. We have bombs in the last 3 carriages. Bring me the gnome or every 15 minutes I blow one up. How's that for motivation? Ciao. The PA switched off. I don't think he's bluffing, Fia said in my ear. I can see guards in each one of those rear 3 cars and they're holding down the fort. Passengers are tied up as hostages. If the bombs are in there, they're hidden though. They'll be in the luggage, I answered. Where are we at with backup? Terracoastal and friends at least an hour away, she said. In the meantime, I'll backtrack the recordings, see if I can see where the gang has stashed the bombs. Do you think he's serious? The gnome asked, stupidly. I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed him by the collar. Okay, time to talk. What's with this wand? He brought his hands up defensively. It's a wand, man. They paid me to steal it. I rolled my eyes. I knew a little about wands. Being a cipher, I use magic. It's handy to understand where your skills come from, fit in with other disciplines. But this was not like any wand I'd ever seen before. No shit. Who's they? The gang. The Torrents. They paid me to steal it from Merlin Tech. It's a new kind of wand. It can store spells. That was news to me. Wands were an amplifier, and a focus for the old school spell chuckers. You couldn't store magic in them, though. So what, it's like a gun for spells? He shrugged. I guess? That was dangerous. If you can make a weapon that could store spells and throw them out without magical talent. It was a sobering thought. And anyone can use it, I clarified. Well, yeah, you just need a cipher and a wizard to load it with the spells in the first place, and then... He made a flinging gesture with his hands. It's good to go. I finished the sentence for him. I pondered this for a moment. Does it need to be reloaded? How many spells does it hold? He shook his head. That's all I know, man. I just lifted the thing. You're the god's damn cipher, you tell me. But you used it. I panicked. So why did you skip town on them then? I had another buyer, a buyer from over west. And how's that working out for you? As if to emphasize that I didn't have time for this, the door further along opened and the orc stepped in, covered in blood and looking like he'd just gone 10 rounds with a front-end loader. Fia! What? Oh! Sorry, yeah, orc boy's incoming. I leveled my pistol at him. Fuck off, I swear to gods I'm not in the mood. He stopped dead in his tracks, despite the fact my pistol was probably as effective as a pop gun against him. He held up his hands. Now back to normal, weapons retracted. Okay, chill. I'm on your side, he said calmly. I narrowed my eyes at him. Fine, explain who the hell you are. He reached inside his vest and pulled out a badge. I lowered my pistol and let out a slow expletive. Ah, shit. Why didn't you say you were a hunter? When would I have had time? Damn it, just what I needed, competition. I hadn't even thought to run his ID, but he was right. When did I have time? So what, you're here for him too? I motioned to Eric with my pistol. He flinched. The orc shook his head. No, I'm here for the wand. Like the conductor said, short stack is just a bonus. I stepped up closer to him and holstered my gun, pulling the wand out in the process. Got a name? Mason. Hercule Mason. I had heard the name. I didn't know Hercule was an orc, though. I thought with a name like that he was some sort of Ponzi elf. My parents read a lot of Agatha Christie, he said as if to answer my surprised look. I waved it off, like it wasn't funny. Well, my parents read a lot of mythology. I'm Ulf. He cut me off with a wave of his hand. Yeah, I know, Ulf Whitlock. Black Dog. I've heard of you. That surprised me. Hunters talked about other hunters, and anyone who had been at it long enough got nicknames. But I didn't know my name had travelled that far east. Yeah, where did you hear that name? We can exchange further pleasantries later. Right now, we need a plan. I pulled Eric with me and closed the gap between us. Well, how are you at hand-to-hand combat? He grinned. I got a really sharp hand. I shook my head. No, I mean empty hand. My tech support is working on switching back on the anti-violence programs. Your Almar will be out of action, but then again so will theirs. He shrugged. I can take a couple at a time. Good, because I'm going outside to find the bombs. You think they're strapped to the outside of the train? He asked, skeptically. No, but I need to get to the other end of the train without anyone slowing me down. They'll start the detonations from the back and work their way forward if I'm any judge. I pulled Eric out in front of me and pushed him towards Hercule. Try and keep him alive. He's not really my problem. No, well, consider it a trade. When I get back alive, you can have the wand. I slid it into my jacket pocket and patted it down. Fia's voice cut in. Get ready, guys. It's time for shit to get interesting. I held up a hand, forestalling the orc's protests. We're about to go into weapons lockdown. Be ready. The anti-violence programs weren't perfect, but they would stall out 90% of weapons and tech. Anything that had modern responsive tech built in. No offense, Hercule said, looking sheepish. But how are you gonna deal with any obstacles? He flexed his bionic arms to indicate he clearly thought I wasn't capable. Compared to him, he probably wasn't wrong.
I've got a few tricks up my sleeves, don't you worry. He raised an eyebrow and glanced at my shredded sleeves. Metaphorically, we walked to the adjoining door and it slid open automatically. The security apparently having been switched off in these areas. I assumed I had Fia to thank for that. Hercule and Eric moved along to the next carriage. I moved to the service door in the side of the wall. If I remembered properly, there should be a ladder on the side of the door leading to the roof. Sure enough, being buffeted by the wind was a small service ladder, welded to the outside of the train. I climbed up the ladder and poked my head over the roof of the train, expecting something. I felt for sure there would be a guard up here, someone with a shot rang out. The sound of a round ricocheting off the steel in front of me made me drop back down. I was just considering going back inside and trying to come up from behind them when I remembered the wand and that damn fireball Eric had fired. I pulled it out and looked it over. It was covered in runes. Some of them I had a rough idea of, some were alien to me, but if this was as high-tech as the gnomes said... I extended my senses into the wand, looking for anything I could control. Opening my vision to the other spectrum of electricity and data, it glowed yellow. It pulsed with power. I pushed my mind inside it and saw it was compressed with raw energy and spell data. But a cipher had clearly had a hand in its construction. There was enough of our magic in here that I manipulated it to my will with ease. Are you seeing this? I asked Fia, sending my visual readouts to her. It's insane. It's like someone jammed a fusion reactor into an e-cigarette. It was so simple to use for something so complicated to construct. It's a damn liability is what it is. You gonna use it? She asked nervously. I couldn't help but laugh. You bet your ass. It had two spells as far as I could tell, a fireball and what seemed like a telekinetic blast of some kind. It seemed to have a huge amount of energy stored up. You just had to adjust the grade. Pulling myself back to reality, I peeked out over the edge of the roof. I could just see a streamlined shape of a sharpshooter laying prone. I ducked just as a second shot whizzed past my face. It was actually surprisingly intuitive to use. Pressing my fingers on the corresponding runes for fire and then holding the casting rune, I leveled the wand over the edge of the roof and let out a huge blast of fire. It didn't need to be accurate. I made it as large as I could. Less than a second passed and I heard the scream. I threw myself up the ladder and onto the roof. Then, with only a glance over my shoulder to see a figure rolling back and forth trying to put out the flames, I ran over the last few carriages to the rear of the train. That was fun, I said to the air in general. They might have survived, could alert the others. Not much I can do about that, I said, dropping back down onto the rear platform. I'll try and... There was a crackling sound and she cut off. I paused. Fia? More static. Fia, do you copy? I could just make out her voice, but it was broken and fading. They'd cut us off. Looks like I was on my own then. I lifted the sword hilt from my belt and swiped the access card across the lock panel at the rear of the train. As the door slid open, a blade slid from the hilt in my grip. It was 3 feet long, razor sharp, and specifically tuned for use in the hands of a cipher. This was old tech and mostly magic. The door slid back. The first guard they had posted there didn't see it coming as I ran the blade straight between two of his lower ribs and into his gut. He fell like a limp fish as I ripped the sword from him. The second guard, seeing his buddy skewered in front of him, raised his pulse rifle in record time and pulled the trigger. I was already moving towards him, hoping against hope that Fear had fully restored the anti-violence programs. I didn't even bother trying to hack his system, I just went full offensive. To his credit, he realized the gun wasn't going to fire a split second before I got to him, raising it in both hands like a staff to block a downward strike. Sparks flew as my blade skated along his barrel. I shifted the angle of the cut and he quickly dropped one hand away so I didn't take his fingers off. He pushed back, raising his right leg to kick me in the knee. I jumped back and then turned side on, his barrel rifle coming down like a club and missing my face by a finger's width. I lunged at him, dropping low, sword level like a fencer. He stepped backwards. His footing was betrayed by fallen luggage. The thug went backwards into the seats and suitcases, his improvised club fallen from his hands. Back on solid footing, I shuffled forwards and plunged my sword tip into his right leg, just above the ankle. He cried out in pain, one hand gripping my blade, trying to remove it. He wasn't going to stand up in a hurry. I looked up at the seats, taking note of the passengers for the first time. They were all tied to their seats with zip ties. They looked scared as shit. I knew the gangers had taken hostages. I couldn't see anyone dead though, which meant no one had put up a fight. Good. Smart. I gripped my weapon tight. A Cypher's sword was an extension of them, like a wand to a wizard, and it didn't bow to security programs, being closer to magic than modern tech. I channeled a pulse of power through it, and it manifested as a surge of electricity, shocking my new friend for a full 3 seconds. I leant down to face him. Smoke issued from the mechanical joints in his legs, his eyes bloodshot. I'm only going to ask this once, so have a good think. Where are the bombs? He spat in my face. I ripped the blade from his ankle and drove it into the other leg just above the knee. Sparks flew as I severed circuitry and servos. He screamed again, and I knew that this wasn't going to be a cheap fix. I didn't say anything. I just shocked him again. I told him I wasn't asking twice. It's not my fault he didn't listen. I held the surge this time, 5 seconds. It was taking it out of me to funnel this kind of power, even with what the sword held in reserve, but if he talked it would save me a lot of looking. On a hunch, I brought the vision of data and energy signatures to my eyes and scanned the room. There was so much tech here. A bomb just needed a receiver, a detonator, some explosives. People's comm devices, tablets, and lightweight tech in most day-to-day equipment, it all looked roughly the same. I decided to play a card. I summoned a spell. It wasn't actually an aggressive spell. Didn't matter. It looked flashy to prepare. My offhand held aloft, and hieroglyphics appeared encircling it in the air. His eyes widened as he realized what I was. I can feel it, I said in a dreamy voice. I could just pop it from the other carriage. Problem solved. The fear in his eyes betrayed him. You wouldn't. He licked his lips nervously, looking around at the rest of the passengers tied to their seats. Come on, man, we're all in the same boat here. I grinned, more symbols appearing, starting to rotate around my hand. I'm in the boat, I said calmly. You're in the water. I pulled the sword from his leg and moved towards the door. What, wait! He cried out desperately. I turned to look at him and raised an eyebrow. His eyes flicked to a red suitcase strewn on the ground with the others. Bingo. I stepped over the other bags and lifted it gently, then opened the back door of the train and tossed it out. The man breathed a sigh of relief. I knew you weren't going to do it, he sneered. I looked down at him, then back to the open door. I cut the restraints on a couple of people and left them to deal with the rest of the passengers themselves. I pointed out to them that the safest place was staying here at the back of the carriage. If the bomb went off in the next car, hopefully it would just blow them loose and they would be left to roll to a stop. Hopefully. The next carriage door gave way with some effort and a shove. Someone had tried to jam it, but failed. I felt the electrical impulses from my attacker before I saw them. Their fists shot out from behind the door and I leant back, the blow missing me by millimeters. I brought my sword up to cut the hand off at the wrist. It didn't go the way I'd planned. The woman attacking me, a half-orc, attached herself to my arm and did the cleanest disarm I'd ever seen, my weapon being thrown aside. She squared up and raised her arms in a traditional boxing form as she backed off slightly. I sighed and brought up my arms to match. I was not a boxer. She very clearly knew exactly what she was doing. And then she smiled. This was proving to be a very long night.
Thank you for listening to Cyphers Edge. Subscribe so as not to miss future episodes. Script and narration by J.J. Brandis. Music was provided by Kayor McLeish. Copyright J.J. Brandis 2024.